octahedron produce perfect phi ratios in space. So this is fourfold geometry producing phi ratios. And by the way, as it collapses, it as well not only produces the phi ratio, but it produces the platonic solids, including the icosahedron, which is dual to the dodecahedron, which is what you're talking about. So it's not separated, it's all together. It is, again, it's never the chicken or the egg, but it's always both. It's a whole system. It's not the fourfold geometry or the fivefold geometry, but in the cases of the vacuum, where the vacuum goes to singularity, it must assume the function of a cube octahedron, the fourfold geometry, because that's where equilibrium is achieved. But to get there, it goes through the iteration of the phi geometry. So it's a correct statement what you're saying, but it's incorrect to think of the fourfold geometry as not having the phi relationship in it, because it is in it when it is dynamic.
Well, that's beautiful, Nassim. Thank you. We had actually played with the vector filter and the jitterbug, even direct from Bucky here, when you were with us. So yes, point well taken. Thank you.
Okay.
We discussed the path curve of the jitterbug collapse as being a possible mechanism for superconductivity. In fact, from the conference in Buffalo, New York. But at any rate,
that path is a perfect phi ratio in 3D space, and you know that. I think I discovered independently. I don't believe anybody realized that before.
Maybe Bucky did it, but you did more math. I honor that, sir. Great. So, more questions, please.
Yeah, Nassim, this is Scotty with the Digital Gorillas. I met you down at the International Alchemy Conference recently in Los Angeles. You might remember me. I had the camera on you, and at one point you asked me to not share the footage of you and what you were sharing with us there at that conference. I'm wondering if you would allow me to make this video public today.
No, I'd rather not.
Can you?
You mean the video of this conference?
Yes, in this conversation. I'm just wondering why. I honor that, as I said to you.
You know, it's a very fine balance that I walk. It's a very fine edge that I walk between the mainstream scientific community and the more esoteric community. And it's really important that I'm able to continue to walk and dance that dance. And then as well, on that edge is the consideration for safety and security of me and my family, and so on. And so, you know, all these timing issues have to be controlled, and there's many things that I do that are not necessarily public knowledge. And you know, I'm being very open here because I believe this group is interested in some of the hardware and some of the, you know, application of the theory and so on. But in general, I don't make that available on the internet or public.
Of course, we would honor your request, Nassim. Thank you for sharing.
So we can do some more questions, folks.
More questions here, or more questions in the virtual?
Yeah, let's see if there's anything from there.
I just want to mention that I'm not trying to be a hard ass on those first questions. I'm just wanting to make clear that it's really important that we get rid of dogma and enter a world in which science and spiritual knowledge are unified. And the tendency for the spiritualists is to think that the external world of technology is not necessary, and the tendency for the scientific people is to believe that the internal world of consciousness is not necessary. And at this point, it's really crucial that these two come together and transcend so that we can really move forward.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Nassim. Let's just ask around, see if we have more questions. Either Catherine, you have questions there, or are we all set?
We do have just one question. Several virtual attendees wonder how close your technology is to a commercial application even to the home.
Well, there is different levels of commercial application. Certainly, it's very close to being able to produce, very powerful water compounds, charge at different levels. I assure you, this first experiment was very low powered. I mean, actually, no power at all. But even when we spun the field in the first place, it was very low power, very low speed, and I didn't expect it to do anything at those speeds. I was just testing my electronics and so on. But certainly, we're very close to being able to. We could charge water to levels that I can't imagine at this point. When we're talking about speeds. Rotational speeds that exceed, millions of RPMs. And then, we could change the structure of crystals to produce all sorts of devices in the optical and the healing industry. There's all sorts of applications that are not directly, getting out there selling these devices at Walmart, but eventually, certainly, as we develop these applications and as we develop the technology, in a very short amount of time, we could have energy devices and gravitational devices made available, and our world is about to make that leap, and it's a very tentative moment in history, and so the timing has to be right, the funding and the resources has to be right, and the team that brings it forward has to be right. And until that's in place, it's probably not going to happen. So it's been quite the adventure to make that all coordinate together and be able to birth this into the world. But it's very close, and it's important to know that this technology is patent pending as well.
Thank you, Nassim.
Any questions, folks? Yeah, we've got a question over there.
Another question here. Young and handsome gentleman in our audience.
I wanted to ask if the gases inside the quartz globe have to be ionic to achieve rotation in the magnetic field.
Did you hear that, Nassim?
No, it was muffled.
Okay, he asked if the gases in a quartz chamber have to be ionic in order for the magnetic rotation to be coupled or achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to be ionized. They can be ionized by multiple ways. And sure, yeah, they have to have a magnetic component so that they can follow the field. Now, there's many different ways you can go about that, and I don't want to get into too many details, but yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's very good. Good conclusion.
And so, no, please.
Also, I was wondering if the coils that you placed on top of your metal frame were conical in geometry.
If the coils you placed on your metal frame were conical in geometry, that's his question.
Yeah, well, definitely the poles of the coils is conical in geometry, and those angles are very, very crucial, and they must match the angles that nature will use to flow, and so it's a relationship between particular conical geometry and torus structure, where the center of the system goes towards singularity. So the idea is that if we obtain enough velocity in the compression of the magnetic field towards the center, then we eventually will have relativistic rotational speed at a small radius inside the system, and now we have singularity. We have a little controlled mini black hole.
Okay, last one. On the photo that you showed on the right of your coil setup,
Am I correct in saying that the large coil surrounding your main device was set up similarly to the primary coil of the Tesla coil?
Okay, I didn't hear that.
Is the large coil of the device similar to the primary coil?
Copper tubing.
Why don't you come here? Just come here. The microphone's here. Just state your question very briefly, but just speak into this mic.
I was just wondering if the coil on the photo that you have on the right surrounding your main device was acting like the primary coil of the Tesla coil.
Yes, well, part of the coil is a primary coil, inductive coil, and part of the coil is a secondary coil. So there's both in there. And yes, but that's a good conclusion, very good. And what I'm saying here is that, basically, the coil structure is like starting your engine. When you get the crystal and the gases to oscillate at the right frequency and everything is going, then you shouldn't need the coils anymore. You can actually remove the crystal, and the vorticular dynamics of space-time that you've created is going to follow the crystal since the singularity is in it. And so basically you can pop a crystal in, power it up, and then pop it out, put another one in, power it up, and pop these things out, little suns. The idea is that we can, as I shown in my first experiment, these vorticular dynamics can, if they're spun to the right field geometry and the right speed, can maintain spin and structure of space-time for thousands of years. And so until they spin down again, and then you pop them back in and go again. And, and I believe, this links to the ancient civilization research I've done, that actually these objects were present on our planet thousands of years ago. They were given to us by advanced civilization that visited us a long time ago, and there's a lot of evidence for that. And I assure you that these statements may sound very erratic, it's a result of a lot of years of research, and now even the Vatican is starting to agree with me. I don't know if you all saw, but last week the Vatican announced that we were going to be contacted by extraterrestrial life very soon. They had a whole conference about it. And this is not the kind of thing that the Vatican would normally be very forward about. They're not the type to be at the head of the curve. And, it's remarkable that they're making those statements, and that certainly shows that they know it's coming. I think they just excused Galileo in 1997 or something. They're not the kind to make these very forward statements. So I think we're approaching a very crucial time where this very ancient knowledge that's ancient to our planet is actually re-emerging. And that relates to the Ark of the Covenant, to the Kaaba, the center of Mecca, to the Disc of Mu in South America and Mexico region. I mean, I believe that this knowledge and this technology was well known and utilized in the previous evolution of our society that we've lost track of, that occurred prior to the Great Flood, the Great Changes.
So speaking of that, Nassim, I had been suggesting that if the Ark of the Covenant was indeed a phase conjugate dielectric, that in addition to making the voltage for gold powder manufacture, it also was likely a device to non-destructively contain radioactivity?
Well, I don't know about that, but I certainly believe that from my study of the ancient texts, from correlation between various ancient texts, from from ancient Vedic tradition that date from 13,900 years old to other texts all around the world, and the Bible, and Rabbinic tradition, and so on, that this crystal structure that was given to man by advanced civilization and recorded in over 300 different countries around the world, that this technology was inside the box, that the box that's described as the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible is only a carrying case, a capacitor to contain the energy dynamics of such an object, certainly in the circumstances of having to transport it across a desert for 40 years. And then eventually it was further contained and shielded from the population by placing it in the Holy of Holies at the center of the Temple of Solomon, which was the biggest temple ever built, and it was to host the Ark of the Covenant. So I think that the Kabbalistic tradition is the unspoken knowledge about the technology that was inside the box. And it was very, very clear in all the rabbinic tradition that you didn't describe the inside of the ark. You were allowed to describe the outside, its dimension and everything, but which was called the seat of God, but you weren't allowed to describe God or the power at the center, which, certainly ancient civilization that weren't aware of advanced technology would have looked at this device as God, and they wouldn't have been wrong about that. If you're reproducing the fundamental dynamics of creation, you're basically tapping into what you could call God, and so on. And so I think that the Kabbalistic tradition, which were oral tradition that were communicated from high priest to high priest for thousands of years, is actually addressing what was inside the ark, which was called the Tetragrammaton, which is the translation, the Greek word translation for the word God in the Bible. And the Tetragrammaton then is describing those traditions with the correct geometry and all the information necessary to make it work.
We had suggested here that the two opposing cone triangles called Yod and Vav, Yod and Vav, or Tetragrammaton, were in fact a picture of the two opposing plasmas encountering the cone tip called phase conjugation. So making the principle of phase conjugation roughly equivalent to God in that sense. Would you agree?
Oh yes, absolutely. It's the relationship between spin and counterspin. Complicated.
So, well, that's great. Nassim, I remember that, I don't know if you are okay to be personal just a little bit, you were so kind as to share that was it your grandfather was the tour guide to Mecca?
Yeah, he was a guide that brought the prayers of the people that, all Islamic people have to go to Mecca once in their lifetime. Many of them cannot afford to go, but they're allowed to send somebody with their prayer. And so my grandpa was a Bedouin that brought the prayers of the people that could not go to Mecca for them and guided the ones that could go. It was a 6-month track on camelback across the desert to go to Mecca, and 6 months back. And then when he was there, you have to go around 7 times, as a person going to Mecca to pray. And so he had to go around 7 times for every prayer he was bringing for every person. So he would just spin around this object, which was called in the Quran is called the black stone or the black crystal, and that comes from earlier tradition from the Sumerian, which called it the black sun, which all are relating to this object that produces a singularity or a little black hole. And and so he spun there many, many times, a long time, and turns out that my grandfather lived to 128 years old, documented, and father has an article from the Tehran press that when he died, claiming that he might have been the oldest man on earth, but we don't know because many people in the high mountains are not registered and so on.
Just Nassim, I was imagining here that the yearning in your grandfather's blood to take people to the black hole is something that you're now completing for him.
Yeah, it might have been in my genes to complete this mission, and
we have another question here. Go ahead, thank you. Could you come up here? Actually, I'm sorry, but
Is that mic on, Paul?
Nassim won't be able to hear you from that place. Just switching of input to output here is a bit complicated.
Just come on up.
Sorry. If you could just speak into this microphone at the computer here, and speak fairly loudly, then I think Nassim can hear you. The microphone is right here. Just say your question briefly, please.
Hello, Nassim.
yes.
I'm just asking more from a, I don't know, spiritual level or something. When we are recontacted, how do you see society or humans or all of us on Earth reacting? I guess what I'm asking is, what am I to expect of this? Is it going to be something horrible or something wonderful? And then the other question I want to ask, besides that, is this related to all of the 2012 hype, these new discoveries that are coming up?
Well, good questions. I would say, amazingly, certainly for the first time in history, I agree with the Vatican that, as they mention in their press release, that most likely these beings are benign, and that it will be a wonderful experience, a great transcendence for humanity in many different ways. I think it's going to be beautiful, and